Hi, I'm Steve Hebrock of the Enlightened Equine Conservatory. I've been doing research on the subject of landings for a long time now, and I'll be describing more about my work in an upcoming podcast episode. But for now, I want to concentrate on something that I called the Landings Project. By design, feral horses in their aboriginal environment, the U.S. Great Basin, land flat, or more correctly said, with no motion of the coffin joint at the moment of ground contact. And you can observe this in any of Ginger Catherine's cloud videos or Drs. Pollard and Hampson's The Desert Brumby video. Find a spot where you can see the feet making ground contact on flat level ground and slow the video down so you can clearly see what's happening at the moment the foot touches the ground. What you'll note is that it's a very even contact with no slapping down of the foot in the front to back direction. They land that way because their considerable daily movement over abrasive terrain wears any part of the hoof that would have made uneven ground contact off. It's gone. And for me, my background as an engineer made that patently obvious from the first time I thought about hoof landings. And that's in spite of this commonly held belief that horses are supposed to land heel first. According to Dr. James Rooney, the well-known equine pathologist, lameness expert, and author, this flat landing is absolutely crucial because any other landing, especially on hard ground, leads to vibration of the coffin joint and friction across the navicular bone, causing long-term soundness problems for the horse. And he explained all this in his seminal book, Biomechanics of Lameness in Horses, published in 1969. And in my opinion, there's yet another, perhaps equally or even more serious, health risk associated with non-flat landings in the form of low-frequency vibration traveling through the fetlock and up the leg, which we'll look at later on. I've been designing instrumentation to measure landings since 2000. And in 2016, we did some landing measurements on 5 lesson horses at the university where I was teaching. And that's what I want to show you in this video. We equipped the horses with a sensor like this, which measures motion in all 3 axes. But for this particular study, we were only interested in the x-axis angular velocity, when and how quickly the hoof rotates in the front to back direction. That enabled us to see whether the landings were flat, heel first, or toe first. Let me first show you what a graph of the data looks like. Now, if the hoof is stationary, the graph is a flat line. But when the hoof capsule rotates forward, as with the heel first landing, we see a positive excursion in the graph. And when the hoof capsule rotates backward, as with the toe first landing, we see a negative excursion in the graph. So the experiment went like this. We did a total of 6 data collections on each of the 5 horses under 3 different hoof trim conditions and 2 terrain conditions, while simultaneously video recording the data collection. We first collected data and recorded the 5 untrimmed horses on both the hard footing of the school barn aisle and then on the soft footing of the outdoor arena. We then did what we labeled a pasture trim on the 5 horses, where we basically left the heels alone and just trimmed the toes, and then recollected data on the 2 types of terrain. Finally, we did what we called a natural trim on the 5 horses, and once again recollected data on the 2 terrain types. Now, there were 2 issues with this study. First of all, the sensors I used collect data at a rate that's only just acceptable at the speed of a walk. So I'm now using sensors with a much higher data collection rate for better accuracy. And 4 of the 5 horses we used in this study ended up having very little hoof growth to work with when trimming. So only 1 of the horses ended up with a readily discernible heel-first landing. Nevertheless, the results of his data collection are very interesting and raise some more questions worth pursuing. I'm going to show you the results in the opposite order in which the data was actually collected. In this first graph, which as you'll note is the data from the natural trim on the barn aisle, the points on the graph where the foot begins breakover and then makes ground contact are quite obvious. Once the foot contacts the ground, there's no further motion of the hoof capsule. Now on the second graph, we've added the data from the natural trim on the softer ground of the outdoor arena. Note that the commencement of breakover and the landing points are very consistent with those seen on the hard surface, meaning the horse's foot movement throughout the stride is the same on both types of terrain. Understanding the implications of this is extremely important, and it goes back to my earlier point of saying that it's not really about a flat landing, it's about a no motion of the coffin joint at the moment of ground contact landing. And that's because unless the feral horse's terrain is extremely hard and abrasive, there will be slightly less wear at the heels than for a feral horse on extremely hard and abrasive ground. Nevertheless, the foot will still land with no motion of the coffin joint because the foot will be worn such that that bit of extra heel length will simply penetrate the ground and land effectively flat. But if you were to take that same horse into the laboratory and look at how he lands, he's going to land slightly heel first. This terrain-dependent wear is maybe the key point in understanding how and why horses land as they do. In the third graph, we add in the pasture trim data on the hard surface. Note that breakover appears to start later than with the naturally trimmed foot. Why? Well, I think it's because if the heels are too long relative to the toe, meaning the foot's more upright, it takes more time for the leg above the foot to be in the right position relative to the foot for the soft tissues to do their thing and start to rotate the foot forward. So while it may seem logical to think that longer heels would speed up breakover, it appears it actually has the opposite effect. Note also that it takes some time for the foot to settle into no motion after the landing. But the exact moment of landing isn't really obvious to me from this data. What is significant, though, is that the landing isn't as clean as the naturally trimmed foot landing. And you'll see what that means for the horse later on in this video. The fourth graph has the addition of the pasture trim data on soft ground. Breakover once again starts earlier on the soft ground because the excess heel length has penetrated the surface and allowed the foot to be in the proper relationship with the limb above, which means it can begin breakover sooner. But look at what's happened to the heel first landing. Instead of landing heel first, as on the hard surface, the foot appears to be continuing to rotate backward at the moment of ground contact, making it, in effect, a toe first landing. So our heel first landing on a hard surface seems to have become a toe first landing on a soft surface, which I find very interesting because most of the people who claim horses are supposed to land heel first will also claim horses should never land toe first. Yet it appears that they're doing both. But please keep in mind that this is data on a single horse. There's a lot more work to be done before any solid conclusions can be reached. Now, I mentioned my concerns about the long-term health effects of low-frequency vibration on the horse's leg, and I want to leave you by showing you exactly what I'm talking about. In the first video, you'll see how a properly trimmed foot makes ground contact, meaning a foot trim to make ground contact the way feral horses do in their aboriginal environments. Note that the foot simply touches down with no additional motion of the hoof capsule and then lifts smoothly off the ground. But also, pay attention to the leg above the foot. Note how its motion is very smooth with no jerkiness. Now contrast that with this video of a horse landing heel first. Note not only that the foot slaps down on the ground after making ground contact, but also check out the vibration in the leg above the foot. And keep in mind two things. First, that vibration has long been recognized as causing health problems for humans, and exposure to it is therefore regulated. And second, that the improperly trimmed horse is exposed to this vibration literally with every step he takes. Thanks for watching, and if you find this sort of topic interesting, consider joining us at one of our comprehensive hoof care workshops. Our discussions go far beyond just the basics of trimming because all of this stuff matters to your horse.